Commander Elias walked slowly along the cracked, dusty roads of the settlement, the sun glaring harshly overhead. The colony had seen better days. Buildings leaned at odd angles, and the faint smell of smoke and cooking fires mixed with the scent of dry earth. For years, the humans who had settled here had struggled against the harshness of this remote planet. Crops barely grew, water was rationed, and the sounds of distant machines filled the air. Still, Elias had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life here, the small victories and the quiet hardships alike. He paused for a moment near a crumbling wall, scanning the empty street ahead. Something moved in the shadows of the alleyways, quick and small. His instincts went on alert. Years of experience in hostile environments made him cautious, yet what he saw didn't trigger fear, it tugged at something deeper. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8, crouched beside a broken crate. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her hair tangled, and her eyes, wide and alert, scanned the street nervously. She held a small, empty bowl in her hands, and the sight made Elias pause. Hunger was written across her face in a way that words could not describe. She looked up at him briefly, her eyes a mixture of hope and fear. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The air between them was quiet except for the distant hum of machines and the occasional creak of the settlement structures settling in the heat. Elias knelt slowly, careful not to scare her. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small container of soup he had saved from his rationed supplies. It wasn't much, but it was warm, nourishing, and freshly prepared. "Here," he said softly, extending it toward her. The girl hesitated. She had learned long ago that adults could be dangerous or indifferent. But the warmth of the soup, the genuine kindness in Elias's eyes, made her take a small step forward. She accepted the bowl, her small hands trembling slightly. Her eyes lit up with a spark of hope, something Elias hadn't seen on this planet in a long time. "Eat slowly," he advised, his voice calm and reassuring. "There's more if you need it." The girl nodded, biting her lip as she took the first cautious sip. Her small shoulders relaxed slightly, and the tension in her eyes softened. For a few minutes, Elias simply watched her eat. He could feel the weight of the settlement's hardships pressing down on him, but at the same time, a quiet satisfaction warmed him. This small act, so simple, so human, was making a real difference. When she had finished, she looked up at him again. For the first time, she smiled. A small, shy expression that seemed almost foreign on her tired face. Elias smiled back, and for a moment, the harshness of the settlement seemed to fade. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're welcome," he replied. "Do you have anywhere to go?" The girl shook her head. She didn't speak much, but her eyes conveyed enough. She was alone. That thought struck Elias harder than he expected. A child this young, wandering the settlement, hungry and vulnerable. How had she survived this long? He glanced around, considering his options. He could take her to the community center, where some volunteers might provide temporary care. But he knew the place was overcrowded and understaffed. She would receive food and shelter, yes, but she would also lose some of the small independence she had fought to maintain. He didn't want to take that away. "Do you want to come with me for a while?" he asked. "Just until you're safe and fed properly." The girl nodded again, slowly. And Elias felt a small surge of hope. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that, for now, he could make a difference. He led her through the winding streets of the settlement, careful to keep to the less crowded paths. As they walked, he noticed the subtle details he had often ignored before. The way the walls were scarred with years of neglect, the faint smoke from makeshift cooking fires, the scattered debris that hinted at lives lived on the edge of survival. Yet among the decay, there was also life, the small gardens struggling to grow between buildings, the children playing quietly, the determination etched on the faces of the settlers. They reached a small courtyard where a few families were gathered around a shared meal. Elias set the girl down gently and introduced her to the others. At first, she clung to his hand, hesitant, unsure of the warmth and safety around her. But slowly, encouraged by his calm presence, She joined the group. Elias stayed nearby, keeping a watchful eye. As the girl began to eat again, he allowed himself a moment to reflect. Life on this settlement was hard, often cruel, and yet it was moments like these that reminded him why he stayed. The human spirit, resilient and compassionate, had a way of shining through even in the darkest places. After the meal, he decided to take a walk around the outskirts of the settlement. The little girl had wandered a few steps away, exploring cautiously but safely under the eyes of the other settlers. As he walked, Elias noticed a small, forgotten garden behind a crumbling building. The plants were stunted but alive, fighting to survive against the harsh soil and limited water. It reminded him of the girl, fragile, yet persistent, and capable of thriving if given a little care and attention. He returned to the courtyard just in time to see the girl looking back at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. She held a small, makeshift doll in her hands, worn and patched but clearly cherished. Elias nodded at her, offering a smile. She returned it shyly, her small hands gripping the doll tightly. For the rest of the afternoon, Elias remained in the courtyard, talking quietly with a few of the settlers who had come to know him over the years. He shared some of his food, listened to their stories, and offered advice when he could. The little girl stayed nearby, watching him with a mix of awe and caution. She didn't speak much, but her presence was enough to remind Elias of the fragile beauty of human and perhaps universal compassion. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Elias knew it was time to return to his quarters. The little girl followed him to the edge of the courtyard, and for a moment, he wondered if she would disappear into the shadows again, but she stayed, standing quietly, her eyes following him as he turned to leave. "Good night," he said softly. She nodded, her small voice barely audible. "Good night." Elias left the courtyard with a strange sense of peace. In a world often filled with struggle and despair, he had found a moment of connection, a spark of hope. He didn't know what the future held for the little girl, or for the settlement as a whole, but he knew that kindness had a ripple effect. One small act, sharing a meal, offering protection, showing care, could change lives in ways no one could immediately see. That night, as he lay in his quarters, Elias thought about the girl repeatedly. Her eyes, her cautious yet hopeful expression, and her quiet gratitude lingered in his mind. He wondered about her life before this day, how she had survived, and what challenges she faced alone. He also felt a quiet determination. If there was any way he could help her, or the settlement, he would find it. Outside, the settlement slept under a blanket of stars. The machines hummed quietly in the distance, and the faint sounds of life continued in the dimly lit streets. Somewhere, the little girl rested as well, perhaps dreaming of warmth, safety, and a future brighter than the one she had known. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between hardship and hope, a small bond had been formed, a bond that neither time nor distance could easily erase. Elias closed his eyes, letting the events of the day settle in his mind. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that small, rare sense of optimism. A single act of kindness had reminded him why he endured the hardships of this remote planet. Perhaps, just perhaps, it could also remind others that even in a world full of struggle, humanity and compassion could still prevail. As sleep finally claimed him, Elias dreamed not of battles or orders, but of a small girl's smile, the warmth of a simple meal, and the quiet hope that even the smallest actions could create change. A week passed since Elias had shared his soup with the little girl. Every day, he found himself glancing toward the courtyard, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Sometimes, she appeared, lingering near the edge of the small gardens, watching the settlers as they worked and played. Other times, she was nowhere to be seen. Elias understood that she had her own rhythm, her own way of surviving in a world that was often harsh and unpredictable. One morning, as the pale light of the twin suns spread across the settlement, a small crowd gathered near the entrance. Elias, making his usual rounds, noticed a figure approaching. It was the little girl, but she was not alone. Walking beside her, taller than any human, graceful and calm, was a woman whose presence seemed to command attention without effort. Her skin glimmered slightly under the sunlight, reflecting soft hues of silver and gold. Her eyes, intelligent and deep, scanned the surroundings with a quiet authority. Elias slowed, watching carefully. Something about the woman felt different. She moved with precision, awareness, and a quiet confidence that suggested she was more than just a visitor. The little girl ran forward and grabbed Elias's hand, tugging him closer. "Commander Elias," she said softly, though the girl seemed to understand the importance of introducing her companion. "This is my mother." The woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect, and Elias felt a strange sense of recognition, as if he were in the presence of someone who could solve problems larger than himself. "I am Alara," she said, her voice melodic and calm. "I have come because my daughter spoke highly of your kindness." Elias blinked, momentarily lost for words. He had expected a simple explanation, or perhaps a request for assistance. But not this. The woman's presence was striking, almost otherworldly. Yet there was a warmth in her eyes that made him feel at ease. "You honored me by sharing your meal," she continued. "In return, I hope to honor your community with my knowledge." The settlers who had gathered were curious, whispering to each other. Elias could sense both excitement and skepticism in the air. The settlement had seen visitors before, but rarely someone like Alara, someone who exuded both authority and intelligence. "What do you mean by knowledge?" Elias asked cautiously. "We have survived this long with what we have." Alara's eyes softened as she looked around at the cracked walls, the struggling gardens, and the exhausted faces of the settlers. "You have survived, yes," she said, "but survival alone is not enough. There are inefficiencies here. Problems that can be solved with guidance, planning, and cooperation. Your colony has potential that can be realized without losing its independence." Elias listened intently, curious despite himself. He had seen many self-proclaimed experts promise the world, only to leave disappointment behind. But Alara's calm demeanor, her careful observation of every detail, suggested she was different. "I want to help," she said, turning to the settlers who had now gathered fully around them. "I can help with food distribution, energy systems, water management, and infrastructure planning. Your community can become strong, resilient, and thriving." Murmurs of surprise and hope spread through the crowd. Some settlers exchanged skeptical glances, unsure whether to trust an outsider. Others, weary from years of hardship, felt a glimmer of excitement. Elias took a deep breath, considering the offer. "And what will this cost us?" he asked. "We have little to give in return." Alara shook her head gently. "I require no payment. My daughter was cared for, and that is enough. I offer this assistance freely. My goal is to see communities flourish, to solve problems that hinder growth. I do not seek reward." The settlers fell silent, absorbing her words. A few cautious voices broke the quiet. "Can we trust her?" one asked. "What if she changes things we do not want to change?" Elias stepped forward. "I will work with her," he said firmly. "We will make decisions together. Nothing will happen without the input of our community. But we have been struggling for too long. Maybe it is time to try a new way." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Alara's calm smile returned. "Then let us begin," she said. For the next few hours, she moved through the settlement with precision. She examined the water distribution systems, noting where leaks and blockages caused shortages. She observed the food storage and rationing methods, identifying wasteful practices and inefficiencies. She spoke with the settlers individually, listening to their concerns and ideas. Elias followed closely, learning as much as he could. By midday, Alara had gathered a small group of volunteers, including Elias, to start implementing her ideas. The first task was the water system. She explained a simple modification that could reduce waste and ensure every home received adequate supply. Using basic tools and some ingenuity, the settlers, guided by her instructions, began to make the adjustments. The results were immediate. Water flowed more evenly, and everyone could see the improvement. Next, she turned to food distribution. The gardens, though small, were fertile enough to sustain more than the settlers realized. She introduced a rotating schedule for planting and harvesting, ensuring crops were used efficiently and nothing went to waste. The little girl helped, running between her mother and the settlers, carrying small tools and seeds. Her laughter, bright and clear, was a sound Elias hadn't heard in the settlement before. It lifted the spirits of everyone around. By evening, the first signs of change were visible. Water ran more freely, gardens looked healthier, and the settlers, though tired, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Alara gathered everyone together. "This is only the beginning," she said. "If we work together, if we plan carefully and care for each other, your colony can become strong, not just surviving, but thriving." Elias felt a swell of pride. He had known this settlement had potential, but seeing it through Alara's guidance made him realize just how much could be done. He glanced at the little girl, who was now sitting on a low wall. Her face lit with excitement as she watched her mother explain the next steps. The bond between them was clear. A mix of respect, love, and shared purpose. Over the next few days, Alara remained with the colony. She taught practical skills and guided the settlers in organizing their work. The energy among the people shifted from exhaustion and resignation to focus and cooperation. Some were slow to trust at first, questioning whether these changes were sustainable or truly beneficial. But as they saw the results, water flowing evenly, crops growing faster, and energy being used more efficiently, they began to believe. Elias worked tirelessly alongside her, learning not just new techniques, but also the importance of patience, observation, and listening. He realized that leadership was not about giving orders, but about understanding needs and guiding solutions. Alara seemed to embody this principle perfectly, and he absorbed every lesson she offered. One afternoon, as Elias and Alara walked through the newly organized gardens, he asked, "Why help us? There are so many settlements struggling across the galaxy. Why start here?" Alara smiled thoughtfully. "Because your daughter showed me the value of kindness," she said. "A small gesture, a meal, a smile can ripple through a community in ways we cannot predict. You fed her, and in doing so, you opened a door. I am here because that door was opened, and because I believe in the potential of every community, no matter how small." Elias nodded, understanding more clearly than ever before. The little things mattered. Compassion mattered. A single act of humanity could change the course of lives and even entire settlements. By the end of the week, the colony had taken its first steps toward transformation. Water was flowing evenly, gardens were thriving, and the settlers had begun to see a future that was brighter than the one they had known. The little girl ran freely through the streets, laughing and playing with other children, a symbol of hope and gratitude. That evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of purple and gold, Elias stood near the edge of the settlement. He watched the community bustle with renewed energy, and he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. A simple act, a shared meal, had brought someone into their lives who could see solutions they had overlooked. And in turn, their lives, and the lives of many around them, had begun to change. Elias knew this was only the beginning. There would be challenges, disagreements, and setbacks. Change was never simple. But for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. He had witnessed how kindness could ripple outward, how a single choice could bring extraordinary results, and how humanity could shine even in the harshest environments. And somewhere nearby, the little girl sat with her mother, quietly watching the settlement, their presence a reminder that even in the smallest gestures, there could be greatness. Elias smiled, realizing that the world was full of possibilities, and that sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion could lead to the most profound transformations. For the next several weeks, the settlement changed slowly but steadily. What had once been a place filled with worry and hunger now buzzed with voices, movement, and hope. People who had spent years merely surviving were beginning to think about building, improving, and planning for the future. And at the center of this change were Alara, Elias, and the little girl who had unknowingly started it all. Elias woke early every morning, sometimes even before the twin suns rose. The air was cool at that hour, and the settlement felt peaceful. He often found Alara already awake, studying maps of the colony or checking the results of the new systems she had helped them create. She worked tirelessly, but always with a calmness that made others feel steady around her. Even when things did not go as planned, she never raised her voice or showed frustration. Instead, she encouraged the settlers to look at mistakes as lessons rather than failures. One morning, Elias arrived at the community square to find a group of settlers crowded around Alara. She was explaining something using a small holographic display she had brought, one of the few pieces of advanced technology she carried. It showed the settlement from above, with glowing lines indicating water flow, energy routes, and future building plans. The settlers listened carefully, fascinated, and eager to understand. "Your water system now works at 80% efficiency," Alara said in her soft, steady voice. "If we adjust these two lines here, it will reach 95. The people exchanged excited whispers. Reaching 95% efficiency was something they had never imagined possible. Elias watched as Alara patiently answered questions, even the ones that sounded doubtful or confused. Her calm presence helped even the skeptics feel heard and respected. After the meeting ended, Elias walked beside her through the settlement. The little girl followed them, holding her mother's hand. She looked healthier every day, her cheeks less hollow, her steps more confident, her eyes bright with curiosity. "You've changed so much here already," Elias said. "People are working together in ways I've never seen." Alara smiled gently. "People always have the ability to work together. They only need to believe in themselves again. Your community simply needed a reminder of what they are capable of." Elias nodded. "You make it sound simple." "It is not simple," she replied. "But it is possible. And that is enough." As days passed, the work grew more complex. The settlement's energy system was old and unstable, powered by machines that had not been updated for decades. Alara inspected the generators closely, studying every part of them. "These systems can still work," she told Elias, "but they need adjustments. And we must teach your people how to maintain them with the resources you already have. Dependence on outside supplies will only create more problems." So she held training sessions. Adults, and even older teenagers, gathered in groups to learn about energy circuits, maintenance routines, and emergency procedures. Alara kept everything simple, using clear language and demonstrating each step with her hands. Elias helped lead the groups. Though he didn't know all the technical details at first, he learned quickly. Alara noticed this and often gave him small nods of approval. She saw in him something steady, something trustworthy. The settlers also respected him deeply. When he spoke, they listened, because they knew he cared about them. Still, not everything was easy. Some people resisted the changes, feeling nervous and uncertain about relying on ideas they did not fully understand. One evening, as the sun set and the workers rested, a small group approached Elias with complaints. "These new systems are complicated," one man said. "What if they break? What if they stop working in a year? We will be worse off. We've lived like this for years," another added. "Maybe it's better not to change too much." Quote, Elias listened carefully, understanding their fears. Change was frightening, especially after years of disappointment. "Nothing is being forced on anyone," he said calmly. "And Alara is teaching us how to maintain everything ourselves. We won't depend on outside help." "She's not even human," someone muttered at the back. "How do we know she understands our needs?" The little girl heard this from nearby and flinched, her eyes dropping to the ground. Elias felt a pang of frustration but kept his voice controlled. "She understands survival," he said, "and she understands kindness. Both are universal." Alara approached quietly, her calm presence softening the tension. "I do not ask you to trust me blindly," she said. only to watch the results. And if something does not work, we will fix it together. The settlers exchanged hesitant glances, but her steady tone eased their fears. Slowly, they agreed to continue trying, and Alara thanked them with a warm, respectful bow of her head. That night, while the settlement slept, Elias sat outside under the stars. He thought about the challenges ahead. Even with Alara's help, the colony still faced shortages, storms, and unpredictable seasons. Nothing would be solved overnight. But for the first time in years, he felt they were truly moving forward. The next day brought a new challenge, a sandstorm. It rolled in suddenly, covering the horizon in a wall of swirling dust. The settlers panicked. Storms like this could destroy crops, damage equipment, and put lives in danger. Elias immediately activated the emergency alarms, calling everyone to shelter. Alara acted with practiced calm. She and Elias ran from home to home, ensuring everyone made it to safety. The little girl stayed inside the central shelter with a group of children, watching anxiously as her mother and Elias disappeared into the storm. The wind roared, shaking the buildings. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see or breathe. Elias felt the sharp sting of sand against his skin, but pushed forward. Alara guided him, pointing out homes where people needed help. Together, they assisted families, collected supplies, and secured loose equipment. The storm lasted for hours. When it finally passed, the settlement was covered in a thick layer of dust. The people emerged slowly, coughing and shielding their eyes. But they were safe. Alara immediately assessed the damage. Some gardens had been buried. Several roofs were damaged. The water lines, though protected underground, needed checking. The settlers looked exhausted and discouraged. "We will repair it," Alara said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Step by step together. Storms do not destroy communities. Communities rebuild. Her words held strength, and something changed in the settlers' faces. Instead of despair, resolve began to show. They gathered tools and began working under Alara's guidance. Elias stood beside her. "You gave them hope again." "No," she corrected. "Hope already existed here. I only reminded them." They worked all day. The little girl helped carry small tools and brushed dust off the garden beds with careful hands. When she saw her mother smiling at her, she beamed with pride. By evening, most of the critical repairs were completed. The community gathered around Alara and Elias, murmuring gratitude. One of the skeptics stepped forward, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I wasn't sure before," he admitted. "But today you showed us that your help is real. Thank you." Alara bowed her head gently. Elias smiled, feeling relief and pride swell within him. As the sky darkened, the settlement lights flickered to life, stronger and steadier than before, thanks to the repaired systems. People looked around, surprised by how bright the lights were now. Elias watched families return to their homes, talking more hopefully than they had in years. The settlement felt alive, humming with a new spirit. For a moment, he felt grateful, not just for the improvements, but for Alara and the child who had brought her here. That night, as Elias walked Alara and her daughter toward the guest quarters where they were staying, the little girl tugged gently at Elias's hand. "Commander," she said softly, "Mama says you changed things too." Elias chuckled quietly. "I only helped." "No," Alara said gently. "You believed. That is the hardest part." Elias met her eyes, seeing warmth and sincerity there. He felt a quiet connection one built, not on words, but on shared purpose. As they reached the doorway, Alara paused and looked out at the settlement glowing softly beneath the stars. "Tomorrow," she said, "we will begin something new. Something that will make this place stronger than ever." Elias nodded. "And we'll face it together." The little girl smiled, holding both their hands. And beneath the peaceful night sky, the settlement stood stronger than it had in years, ready for the future. Strengthened by kindness, unity, and the quiet power of one small act that had changed everything. The settlement had changed in ways Elias could barely have imagined. The water flowed evenly, Gardens thrived, and energy systems ran smoothly. Children played freely in streets that had once been dusty and barren, while adults moved with a quiet confidence born from seeing their work make a real difference. The little girl, now healthier and full of energy, ran through the streets laughing, her joy contagious. Her presence reminded everyone of what kindness could spark. Elias stood on a small hill overlooking the settlement, watching the sun rise over the twin suns. The light reflected off the buildings, illuminating the progress they had made. Even with the improvements, he knew the work was not done. Challenges would come, as they always did. But now the settlers had learned they could face them together. Alara had not just offered solutions, she had taught them to think, plan, and act with confidence. That morning, Alara gathered the community in the central square. She spoke calmly and clearly, her voice carrying over the crowd. "We have built a foundation," she said. "A strong foundation. But strength is not just about systems and technology. It is about people, their knowledge, and their willingness to work together. Today, we will focus on making this community self-sufficient, capable of thriving no matter what challenges come." The settlers listened attentively. For months, they had watched her guide them, and now they trusted her words. Elias stood beside her, ready to assist. He had learned more than he could have imagined, from systems management to leadership skills, patience, and the power of inspiring trust. Alara began by reviewing the water systems. She explained new methods for filtering and storing water, ensuring that even during dry seasons, there would be enough for everyone. She taught the settlers how to check the pipes, identify potential problems, and fix them with the tools they already had. By showing them, rather than simply telling, she empowered them to take control of their own lives. Next, she turned to energy. The generators, previously unreliable, were now connected through a simple, efficient network that the settlers could maintain themselves. Alara explained how to balance the energy load so that homes, gardens, and community areas could all function without interruptions. She encouraged volunteers to experiment, learn, and teach others. The settlement became a place of shared knowledge, where everyone had a role and everyone's efforts mattered. Food security was the next focus. The gardens had grown stronger, but Alara emphasized crop rotation, efficient planting, and resource sharing. She taught the settlers to compost, collect rainwater, and plan harvests so that no one went hungry. The little girl joined eagerly, carrying small seeds and helping younger children plant their own little plots. Her laughter and curiosity energized the settlers, reminding them that their efforts had immediate rewards. Even with these improvements, Alara knew the colony still faced unexpected challenges. One afternoon, she noticed that a nearby river, critical for irrigation, was slowing due to upstream sediment. If left unaddressed, this could affect the gardens and water supply. She called Elias and several volunteers to help. Together, they built small channels and filters, redirecting the water and removing the sediment. It was hard work, and the settlers' arms ached from digging and lifting. But Alara's calm guidance kept morale high. "Every problem has a solution," she told them. "Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it requires effort and patience. But if you face it together, no challenge is insurmountable." By evening, the river flowed freely again. The settlers cheered, their faces beaming with pride. They were no longer passive observers of their own survival, they were active participants in building a thriving community. Elias felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that the settlement's future rested not just on Alara's guidance, but on the settlers' own courage and ingenuity. As the weeks passed, the colony grew stronger in more subtle ways as well. Communication improved. People shared knowledge, taught skills, and supported each other. Trust replaced suspicion. Where fear had once ruled, hope now prevailed. The little girl blossomed in this environment, her curiosity matched by her mother's gentle encouragement. She asked questions, explored the settlement, and learned not just survival skills but the importance of kindness and cooperation. One day, while inspecting the gardens, Elias noticed her sitting beside a small fountain, carefully arranging pebbles around the edge. She looked up and smiled. "Commander Elias," she said. "Mama says you taught us how to believe in ourselves." Elias crouched to her level. "I didn't teach you," he said softly. "You all learned it yourselves. I only helped you see it." The girl nodded thoughtfully, her small fingers tracing the patterns she had made in the stones. "But you helped Mama see me too," she added. "You gave me soup when I was hungry. That made everything happen." Elias felt a warmth in his chest. He realized how true her words were. One small act, a simple gesture of care, had set a chain of events in motion that changed countless lives. It reminded him that no act of kindness is ever wasted, and that even small decisions can have monumental effects. Later that day, Elias and Alara walked together along the edge of the settlement. The air was warm, and the hum of activity echoed from the central square. Settlers were repairing buildings, tending gardens, and exchanging ideas. Everything felt alive, vibrant, and full of possibility. "You've done something remarkable here," Elias said. "I've seen colonies like this fail, even with all the tools and knowledge. But you didn't just provide tools, you inspired them. You gave them confidence." Alara shook her head slightly. "I did not inspire them. I reminded them. Your colony already had the strength, the intelligence, and the resilience. They simply needed guidance and encouragement. The true power lies in the people themselves." Elias smiled. "It's still amazing. And your daughter, she's changed everything too. She reminded us of what we can do for others, even in small ways." The little girl ran up to them, holding a small bunch of wildflowers she had gathered along the path. She offered them to Elias, her smile wide and sincere. "For you," she said simply. Elias accepted the flowers with gratitude, feeling their meaning deeper than the petals themselves. "Thank you," he said. "This is perfect." That evening, the settlement gathered for a celebration. It was simple, no extravagant decorations or feasts, but it was filled with laughter, music, and shared stories. Settlers spoke of their progress, shared advice, and expressed gratitude for one another. Alara observed quietly, allowing the settlers to take pride in their accomplishments. Elias stood nearby, watching the joy on their faces and the spark of determination in their eyes. The little girl ran from group to group, her laughter ringing clear. At one point, she ran to Elias and tugged at his hand. "Commander, will you stay?" she asked, eyes bright. Elias knelt down to her level. "I'll always be here when I'm needed," he said. "But now it's your turn. You and your community can do amazing things together." She nodded thoughtfully, understanding more than her years might suggest. She turned to her mother, who knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. Alara smiled, pride evident in her eyes. "You've done well, my child," she said softly. "This is only the beginning, but you've already made a difference." As night fell, Elias found himself walking alone through the settlement. Lights glowed warmly in homes. Fires flickered in gardens, and the soft sounds of conversation filled the air. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace here. The settlement was no longer merely surviving, it was thriving, and it had begun with a simple act of compassion, carried forward by courage, knowledge, and the willingness to believe in one another. Elias paused at the edge of the settlement, gazing at the stars. He reflected on everything that had happened. The little girl he had fed, the arrival of Alara, the lessons learned, the storms faced, and the challenges overcome. Every step had led to this moment, a thriving community, ready for whatever the future might bring. In the quiet, he allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had shown its strength not just through endurance or technology, but through compassion, resilience, and unity. Even in the harshest environment, people could rise above limitations, solve problems, and care for one another. This was the lesson he would carry with him always. He turned back toward the settlement, ready to join the remaining settlers in their evening work and conversations. The little girl ran past him, chasing the glow of fireflies with pure delight. Elara followed, observing and guiding her daughter while offering occasional advice to the settlers. Elias felt a surge of hope. The future was bright, and the settlement's people had proven they were capable of shaping it themselves. And in that moment, Elias understood the truth of what had unfolded. One small act of kindness, sharing a meal with a starving child, had started a chain of change that no one could have predicted. From it came guidance, growth, and community. From it came hope, laughter, and life. And through it all, the human spirit had shone brightly, unbroken, resilient, and full of possibility. Elias smiled as he watched the stars twinkle above, the settlement glowing beneath them. Life here had changed forever, and it all began with a simple choice. A choice to care, to share, and to believe in the power of humanity. And that, he knew, was only the beginning.